At 37 years old, Royal Collins made $62,000 a year maintaining the massive, life-sustaining boilers in the basement of the Hennepin County Medical Center. He was a good man who believed in the simple integrity of his work, the hum of well-maintained machinery a more honest sound than most conversations. He lived in a modest two-bedroom bungalow in northeast Minneapolis that he'd put a $40,000 down payment on with the last of the money his mother had left him. And on a Tuesday evening in late September, his 6-year marriage ended over a plate of cooling lemon herb chicken. His wife, Amaya, set her fork down with a delicate click against the $80 crate and barrel plate. The silence in the room was suddenly immense, heavier than the steam pressure in the pipes he managed all day. She looked at him, her beautiful face, the one he'd woken up to for 2,190 days, was a mask of cold resolution. "I never loved you," she said. Her voice wasn't angry or sad. It was flat, informational, as if stating the current market price of a stock. Not really. The 3 words, "not really," were the most brutal part. They didn't just kill the present. They reached back and methodically strangled the past, turning every shared laugh, every anniversary, every quiet moment into a lie. The $45 bottle of Sauvignon Blanc she'd insisted they buy for a simple Tuesday dinner suddenly seemed like a prop in a long-running play where he was the only one who didn't know his lines. He felt a strange and sudden calm descend, a cold, hollow space opening up in his chest where a frantic, beating heart should have been. He had no idea how wrong he had been about everything, but in that moment, a different memory surfaced, a promise from a ghost. It was the echo of his father's voice on his wedding day, a hand on his shoulder, and the weight of a heavy, old bronze key being pressed into his palm. The words his father had spoken, low and urgent amidst the celebration, came back to him with perfect, chilling clarity. "Son, I hope you never, ever need this. But life is long and people are complicated. Take this key, put it somewhere safe, and open the box on the day she says she never loved you." He hadn't understood then. He'd been 29, dizzy with a love he believed was as solid and real as the ground beneath his feet. He'd slipped the key into his pocket and later into a dusty corner of his life, forgetting the strange, conditional warning that came with it. Until now. As he looked at the woman across the table, a stranger in the house he'd worked so hard to make a home, he finally understood. Today was the day. But what Royal didn't know, and what Amaya couldn't possibly fathom, was that the simple bronze key wasn't just a key to a box, it was a key to a different life, a hidden legacy, and a future she had just forfeited in the most spectacular way imaginable. He felt no rage, no fire, just the still, cold composure of a man about to turn a key in a lock that would change everything. The game she had been playing was over. A new one was about to begin. Have you ever had a moment where the floor falls out from under you, but instead of falling, you find out you can fly? Stick with us to see how Royal unlocks a life he never knew was possible, and let us know in the comments if you believe some promises are meant to last forever. Their wedding 6 years prior had been a beautiful, sun-drenched affair in a rented Minneapolis Park pavilion that cost $2,000. Royal, in his simple but perfectly fitted $400 suit, had felt like the richest man on earth. Amaya was breathtaking in a $3,000 designer gown that she'd insisted was a necessary expense. Her parents, a dentist and a professor from Medina, were polite, but maintained an air of detached appraisal, their smiles never quite reaching their eyes. They saw a boiler operator marrying their ambitious marketing executive daughter. Royal's father, Elijah Collins, stood beside him, a pillar of quiet strength. Elijah was a master electrician, a man whose hands, though calloused, could coax light from darkness and order from chaos. He wore a proud smile, his deep brown skin luminous in the afternoon light. He saw his son, a good, hard-working man, committing his heart. During a lull in the reception, while Amaya was laughing with a circle of her sleek, stylish friends, Elijah pulled Royal aside, away from the music and the catered food that was costing them $75 a head. He led him to the shade of a large oak tree. "You happy, son?" Elijah asked, his voice a low, warm rumble. "More than I've ever been, Dad," Royal said, and he meant it. He couldn't take his eyes off Amaya. Elijah nodded slowly, his gaze following his son's. He watched Amaya for a long moment. He saw the way she commanded attention, the easy grace in her movements. But he also saw the quick, appraising glances she gave to the guests, the way her eyes lingered on an expensive watch or a designer handbag. He'd seen that look before, in people who measured the world in dollars and cents. He reached into the pocket of his own worn but respectable suit jacket. "I want to give you something," he said, his voice dropping lower. He pulled out a heavy, ornate bronze key. It was old, the kind of key that might open a sea chest or a church door. A small, tarnished tag was attached to it by a thin wire. "Dad, what's this?" Royal asked, taking it. The key was surprisingly heavy, its cool metal a stark contrast to the warm day. "It's a promise," Elijah said, his eyes serious. "From me to you, a backstop, a fire escape." He took a deep breath. "I like Amaya. She's smart, she's beautiful. But I've been on this earth a while, son. I've seen things. Love should be a fortress, not a ladder. And sometimes, people get those two confused." Royal felt a prickle of defensiveness. "Dad, I love her. She loves me." "I know you do. And I hope with all my heart that she loves you the same way, for exactly who you are," Elijah said, his hand closing over Royal's on the key. "But hope is not a plan. This is part of a plan." He looked his son square in the eye. "I hope you never need this. I pray to God you throw this in a lake 50 years from now on your golden anniversary. But keep it, put it somewhere safe, somewhere you won't forget but won't see every day, and open the box on the day she says she never loved you." The specificity of the instruction was jarring. Not if she leaves you, not if you fight. On the day she says she never loved you. It was a scenario so alien to Royal's state of mind that he couldn't properly process it. "What box?" Royal asked, bewildered. "You'll know which one. The key will tell you," Elijah said cryptically. He clapped Royal on the shoulder, his expression softening. "Now go on. Go dance with your wife. Be happy. Just remember your old man has your back. Always." Royal had slipped the key into his pocket, the weight of it a strange, dissonant note in the symphony of his joy. He'd danced with Amaya. He'd cut the $600 cake. He'd toasted to their future. Later that night, back in their small apartment, he'd found the key in his suit pocket. He'd almost asked Amaya about it, but something held him back. It felt like a secret between him and his father, a sacred, if strange, trust. He ended up wrapping it in a cloth and tucking it into a side pocket of the old leather toolbox his father had given him when he started his apprenticeship, a place so mundane and personal she would never look. And then, in the tide of married life, of bills and groceries and shared routines, he had completely forgotten about it. The memory and the key lay dormant for 6 years, waiting for the trigger words his father had somehow known might one day be spoken. The facade of their marriage was built on a foundation of such routine domestic normalcy that Royal never thought to inspect the cracks. He was the steady bedrock, and she was the beautiful, expensive structure built on top. He saw it as a partnership. He had no idea she saw it as scaffolding. The money was the first and most constant source of friction, a low-grade hum of discord beneath the surface of their lives. Royal's $62,000 salary was a solid, respectable income. It paid the mortgage on their $280,000 bungalow, covered the bills, and allowed for a modest savings plan. But to Amaya, who worked in marketing and was surrounded by people who defined success by zip codes and German car brands, it was a constant, embarrassing limitation. He remembered a Saturday afternoon about 2 years into the marriage. He was in the garage, meticulously patching a small tear in his favorite pair of $80 Carhartt work jeans, a task he found satisfying. Amaya came in, her phone pressed to her ear, and pirouetted in the middle of the concrete floor. She was holding a new purse. "Isn't it gorgeous?" she'd said after hanging up, holding it out for him. It was a black leather bag with a prominent gold clasp, a Chanel. "It's nice," he'd said, genuinely thinking it was. "New?" "It was an investment," she said, the word she used to justify any purchase over $500. "It was on sale. I practically stole it." He knew better than to ask, but the question slipped out anyway. "How much of a steal?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second. $4,200. $4,200. The number seemed absurd, fantastical. It was more than he'd paid for the used 2014 Toyota Camry he drove to work every day. It was almost 3 months of their mortgage payments. He looked from the gleaming, untouched leather of the bag to the worn, faded denim under his needle. The contrast was so stark, it was almost comical. "Amaya, we're supposed to be saving," he said, his voice quiet. "We talked about redoing the kitchen." "Royal, please don't be so provincial," she'd sighed, her tone laced with a familiar, weary condescension. "This is part of my job. It's about image. People see this bag. They see success. It opens doors. It's not an expense, it's a tool." He didn't argue. He never did. Arguing with Amaya was like wrestling with smoke. She was impossible to pin down, her logic shifting and reforming until he was left feeling like a grumpy, unsophisticated fool for even questioning her. So he just nodded, turned back to his mending, and pulled the thread tight. He told himself she was right. She was the one in the corporate world. She knew how it worked. He was just a boiler operator. What did he know about opening doors? He had no idea the only door she was interested in opening was the one leading out of his life. The humiliations were often small, public, and sharp. There was the dinner party at the downtown Minneapolis loft of one of her senior colleagues. The apartment was a cavern of glass and steel overlooking the Mississippi, each piece of furniture costing more than Royal's entire emergency fund. Her friends, all sharp suits and expensive shoes, talked about their recent ski trip to Aspen and complained about the capital gains tax on their stock portfolios. One of the husbands, a man named Todd, with a $15,000 Rolex on his wrist, turned to Royal with a look of polite inquiry. "And what do you do, Royal?" Royal was proud of his job. He kept a major city hospital running. The lights, the heat, the sterilization equipment, it all depended on him and his team. "I'm a stationary engineer at HCMC," he said. "I run the boiler plant." A blank look. Then a small, almost imperceptible dip in Todd's smile. "Oh, right, boilers." The man turned away, his attention already captured by a more interesting conversation about yacht clubs. The silence that followed felt enormous. Royal saw Amaya shoot him a look, not of support, but of pure, unadulterated annoyance, as if his simple, honest answer had been a social gaffe. Later, in the car, she'd been quiet for a long time. "Next time," she'd said, her voice tight, "just say you're in facilities management, it sounds better." "But that's not what I do," he'd protested weakly. "Does it matter?" she snapped. "It's just words, Royal." You have to learn to play the game." He felt a hot flush of shame, not for his job, but for her shame of it. He loved the rumbling heart of the hospital, the tangible reality of his work. He could point to a gauge and say, "I keep that needle in the green. I keep people safe." What could she point to? A marketing deck? A brand strategy? It felt abstract and flimsy compared to the 3-inch steel pipes he worked with every day. The financial strain was a constant, escalating pressure. Her spending was a quiet hemorrhage on their shared account. A $3,500 West Elm sofa because their old one was tired. A new $58,000 Lexus SUV leased because his reliable Camry was an embarrassment. The lease payment was $650 a month, a figure that made his stomach clench. "We can't afford this, Amaya," he'd said, looking at the numbers on their kitchen table. "We can't afford not to," she'd countered, her voice smooth and practiced. "I have to drive clients around sometimes. Image, Royal. It's all about image." He gave in. He always gave in. Because fighting meant facing the terrifying possibility that the woman he loved valued the opinion of strangers more than their shared financial security. It was easier to work an extra overtime shift, to put off buying the new $150 Red Wing work boots he needed, than to confront that truth. The small cruelties accumulated, like layers of silt, until he was buried under them. He'd come home from a grueling 12-hour shift, the smell of the hospital basement clinging to him, a smudge of clean grease on his cheek. He'd leaned in to kiss her as she sat on the new sofa, scrolling through her phone. She'd pulled back, her nose wrinkling in a theatrical display of disgust. "Ugh, Royal. Can you please shower before you even think about sitting on this couch? It's Italian linen. It costs $3,500. It will stain." He stopped, standing in the middle of the living room of the house he paid for. He felt dirty, unwanted. Not like a husband coming home, but like a contamination. He looked at her, so perfect on her perfect couch, and for the first time a flicker of genuine anger sparked within him. But like always, he extinguished it. "Sorry," he mumbled, and retreated to the shower, washing away the grime of his honest day's work. He told himself she was just particular, house-proud. He didn't allow himself to see it for what it was, utter contempt. Each of these moments was a brick in the wall she was building between them, a wall he was too loyal, too loving, to see until she spoke the words that made it all horribly, undeniably clear. He was not her partner, he was her stepping stone, and she had finally reached the other side. The lemon herb chicken on his plate was cold now. The vibrant green of the parsley had dulled. He stared at it, focusing on the details because looking at Amaya's face was impossible. The words "not really" were still echoing in the room, a ricocheting bullet that had torn through the fabric of his reality. Finally, he lifted his head. His own voice sounded foreign to him, a calm, steady thing from a great distance. "Why?" It was the only question that mattered. Amaya seemed to have been waiting for it. She didn't look guilty or ashamed. She looked relieved, as if she had finally unburdened herself of a tedious obligation. She took a sip of her $45 wine. "Because I've met someone," she said simply. Of course she had. The cruelty of her confession wasn't a spontaneous act. It was a premeditated strike, the opening move in her campaign to exit their marriage with maximum advantage. "His name is Marcus," she continued, her voice gaining a new energy, a brightness that was horrifying. "He's a senior partner at the firm. Well, not my firm, but a competing one. We met at a conference in Chicago." Royal said nothing. He pictured a man like Todd, the one with the Rolex, a man who said facilities management instead of boilers. "He's different, Royal," she said, and now her tone softened into a kind of pitying condescension that was worse than any anger. "It's just a different level. The conversations we have, the places we go. He understands the world I'm in. He's part of it." She paused, as if searching for a way to explain quantum physics to a child. "He makes $750,000 a year. Royal." She said the number not as a boast, but as an explanation, as if it were a self-evident truth, a law of nature. It was the answer to the question, why? His $62,000 a year versus Marcus's $750,000. It was that simple. A mathematical equation where he was the smaller, insufficient number. "I tried, she said, a new note of self-justification creeping in. "I really did. I thought you would be more ambitious. I thought you'd move into management, get a degree, something. But you were just content. You're happy in that basement with your pipes and your gauges, and that's fine, for you." The implication was clear. It was not fine for her. It was a lead weight tied to her ankle. He thought of the pride he felt when he successfully completed a complex bypass to repair a critical steam line without shutting down power to the surgical wing. He thought of the quiet satisfaction of a job well done, of physical work that produced a tangible good. In her eyes, all of it was just a basement. She pushed her plate away, her appetite apparently gone now that the unpleasantness was out of the way. She switched into business mode. "Look, I've already spoken to a paralegal friend. It should be pretty straightforward. We sell the house, split the equity. We split the savings. I'll keep the Lexus. You can keep the Camry. I won't go after your pension. I'm not a monster." A monster, he thought. She says that as if it's a magnanimous concession. She had no idea the pension was a pittance compared to what she was unknowingly walking away from. "The house," he started, his voice still unnervingly calm. "The down payment came from my mother's inheritance." She waved a dismissive hand. I know. But we've been paying the mortgage from the joint account for 6 years. It's a marital asset now, Royal. That's how it works. My friend was very clear. She had it all planned out, every dollar accounted for. His $40,000 nest egg, the only thing he had left from his mother, was just another number on her spreadsheet, a column to be divided. She saw him as a simple man, a man who wouldn't know the law, a man who would roll over, heartbroken and defeated. And why wouldn't she? He always had before. She stood up. "I'm going to go pack a bag. I'll stay with my sister in St. Paul for a few days while you process this." She looked at him, her expression a careful blend of pity and impatience. "Try not to make this ugly, Royal, for both our sakes." She walked out of the room. He heard her footsteps on the stairs, the click of her bedroom door shutting. He was alone in the quiet dining room, with the ghost of a 6-year lie and the cold remnants of a meal he couldn't eat. He didn't feel like crying. He didn't feel like shouting. He felt a profound and chilling emptiness. And then, through that void, came the memory of his father's hand on his, the weight of the key, the promise. Open the box on the day she says she never loved you. Today was the day. His father had known. Somehow that wise old electrician had seen the faulty wiring in his son's life from a mile away and had installed a secret circuit breaker. Royal stood up, his movements stiff. He didn't go upstairs. He didn't follow her. He walked to the back door, opened it, and stepped into the garage. The first drops of a cool autumn rain began to fall, a soft rhythmic patter on the asphalt shingles of the roof. It was the sound of a world washing itself clean. The garage was Royal's sanctuary. It smelled of sawdust, oil, and damp concrete. It was a place of order and function, where every tool had its place. His father's old toolbox, a heavy red steel chest, sat on a workbench against the far wall. It was more of a relic than a practical item, Royal had his own modern set of tools for daily use, but he'd never been able to part with his dad's. He ran his hand over the dusty lid, his fingers tracing the faded logo. He lifted the heavy top. The familiar scent of old metal and lubricating oil wafted out. The main compartment held wrenches and sockets, all meticulously cleaned and ordered, just as his father had left them. But Royal's eyes went to the inside of the lid. Taped to the painted metal was a plain, off-white envelope, yellowed with age. His heart began to beat a little faster, a steady, heavy rhythm. He carefully peeled the brittle tape away. The envelope felt thin and fragile in his hands. There was no name on it, no writing at all. He lifted the unsealed flap. Inside were two items. The first was the key. He'd forgotten how substantial it was. The bronze had developed a deep, dark patina over the years, but it was still heavy, solid, and real. It felt ancient and powerful, a thing of purpose. The small circular tag was still attached. He held it up to the dim light of the single bare bulb hanging from the garage ceiling. Etched into the metal, in tiny, precise numbers, were two words, Wells Fargo, 4814. So that was the box, a safe deposit box. Beneath the key was a small, square piece of notepaper, folded twice. He unfolded it. His father's familiar, strong handwriting filled the page. It wasn't a letter, it was a list of instructions. 1. Go to the main branch downtown, the big glass one. 2. Don't tell anyone, not a soul, not until after. 3. There's a letter inside for you. Read it before you do anything else. 4. Daniels and Associates. Ask for Arthur Daniels. Tell him Elijah Collins sent you. He's a good man. He'll know what to do. 5. Be smart, son. Not angry, smart. That was it. No sentiment, just a clear, concise plan of action delivered from beyond the grave. His father, the master electrician, had laid out a perfect schematic for him to follow. Each step was a connection, a wire leading to the next. Royal folded the note and slipped it into his pocket, his fingers closing around the cool, solid weight of the key. He stood there for a long time in the quiet garage as the rain intensified, drumming a steady rhythm on the roof. The sound was comforting, washing away the silence left by Amaya's words. He wasn't the heartbroken, pathetic man she imagined him to be, the one she had left upstairs to process his grief. He was the son of Elijah Collins, and he had a job to do. A profound sense of connection to his father washed over him, so powerful it almost brought him to his knees. His dad had died of a heart attack 3 years ago, a sudden, shocking loss that had left a hole in Royal's life. But in this moment, in this dusty garage, Elijah felt more present than ever. He had seen this day coming. He had seen the truth of Amaya's character, the transactional nature of her affection, and he had prepared. He had not interfered, had not warned Royal in a way that would have broken his son's heart back then. Instead, he had built a lifeboat and left it moored in a secret harbor, waiting for the day the storm would inevitably hit. The love in that act, the sheer protective foresight of it, was overwhelming. It was a love that didn't require flowery words or grand gestures. It was a love expressed in a bronze key, a secret bank box, and a lawyer's name. It was practical. It was powerful. It was real. And it was everything Amaya's professed love had never been. He felt the cold, hollow space in his chest begin to fill, not with rage or despair, but with a quiet, steely resolve. The grief for his marriage was a distant thing, a ship already sailing over the horizon. The immediate task was clear. He had a set of instructions, he had a key, and he had a promise to keep to his father. He would be smart, not angry. The still, bronze key composure his father had modeled his whole life was settling over him now, a suit of invisible armor. He took a deep breath, the damp air of the garage filling his lungs, and he felt ready. The following morning, Wednesday, Royal woke at 6 a.m., his internal clock wired to the minute from years of early shifts. For a split second, as consciousness returned, the familiar weight of his life settled on him. Then the memory of the night before crashed down, cold and absolute. I never loved you. Not really. He lay still for a moment, listening. The house was silent. He slipped out of bed in the guest room where he'd slept, the sheets cold. He walked past the master bedroom. The door was ajar. Amaya was asleep, a sliver of her visible in the dim morning light, looking peaceful, untroubled. An overnight bag, a sleek $800 Toomey weekender, was packed and waiting by the door. A hot surge of anger, the first he truly felt, rose in his throat. He swallowed it down. Smart. Not angry. His father's words. He padded down the hallway to the kitchen. The plan required one more day of performance. One more day of the facade. He put the coffee on. The gurgle of the $150 Breville machine, a familiar, comforting sound. He moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, pulling out 2 mugs, the ones they always used. His was a heavy, plain white ceramic mug. Hers was a delicate floral one from Anthropology that had cost $18. He was performing normalcy, creating a scene so mundane it would be disarming. He heard her footsteps on the stairs a few minutes later. She appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, dressed in a $250 silk robe. She looked wary, her eyes searching his face for the devastation she expected to find there. She was braced for tears, for pleading, for the messy, emotional fallout of the bomb she had detonated. She found none of it. Royal turned from the counter, holding out the floral mug. "Morning," he said, his voice even. "Coffee's ready." Her confusion was plain on her face. This calm, composed man was not the husband she thought she knew. The lack of drama seemed to offend her. "Royal, are you okay?" she asked, her voice cautious. "Just tired," he said, taking a sip from his own mug. It was a perfect lie, plausible and simple. "Long shift yesterday, didn't sleep well." He wasn't looking at her, his focus on the coffee, the counter, anywhere but her eyes. "We need to talk about last night," she began, taking the mug from him but not drinking. "Nothing to talk about, is there?" he said, his tone flat. He finally met her gaze. He let her see the exhaustion in his eyes, but not the source of it. Let her think it was the weary resignation of a defeated man. "You were clear." Her expression shifted. A flicker of something, annoyance, disappointment, crossed her features. She had prepared a speech, a list of justifications, perhaps even a performance of gentle sorrow. His quiet acceptance robbed her of her audience. "Well, okay," she said, thrown off balance. "I'm going to head to my sister's place in a little while." "Okay," he said. He rinsed his mug in the sink. The simple domestic act felt surreal. "I have my afternoon shift at 2, he said, his back still to her, "but I have to run some errands this morning first." "Errands?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Any deviation from his predictable routine was now a source of alarm for her. He turned around, leaning against the counter, forcing himself to look relaxed. "Yeah, just have to go to the bank. And then drop off some paperwork for my pension downtown." It was another lie, built around a kernel of truth. The pension paperwork was a plausible excuse for a trip to the city center. It was boring. It was bureaucratic. It was exactly the kind of thing the old Royal would do. "The bank? What for?" she pressed. "Just need to move some money into a higher yield savings account," he said, the lie coming more easily now. "The interest rate on our main one is terrible." This was a conversation they'd had before, one he'd initiated and she'd dismissed as tedious. Using it now was a small, satisfying piece of psychological warfare. It made him sound responsible and predictable, the very qualities she despised in him. She seemed to accept it. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. He was still the boring, practical Royal she knew. The man who worried about savings account interest rates while she was planning a life of glamour with a high-powered partner. He was no threat. "All right," she said, finally taking a sip of her coffee. "Well, I'll be gone by the time you get back, I guess." "Okay," he repeated. The air was thick with unspoken words, but the tension was all on her side. He felt a strange sense of detachment, as if he were watching a movie of his own life. He was playing a part, the cuckolded husband, and he was playing it with a chilling, convincing stillness. This quiet, hollowed-out man was someone she couldn't fight, couldn't manipulate, couldn't even comfort. His composure was his shield and his sword. It unnerved her more than any shouting match ever could have. He was a stranger to her now, and it was this more than anything that finally made her afraid. She had no idea how much she should be. At 8:55 a.m., Royal stood across the street from the Wells Fargo Center in downtown Minneapolis. It was a monument of glass and steel, a 57-story tower that reflected the crisp blue autumn sky. It felt like a different world from the steam-filled basement of the hospital. He wore his best jeans, the ones without any patches, and a clean Carhartt jacket. He felt out of place, a blue-collar man in a white-collar cathedral. He took a deep breath, the words of his father echoing in his mind. "Be smart, son." He crossed the street and entered the cavernous lobby. The air was cool and smelled faintly of money and cleaning solution. He found the sign for the safe deposit vault and followed the arrows to a quiet, carpeted area. A woman in a sharp navy blue bank uniform sat behind a polished wooden desk. "Good morning," she said, her smile professional. "How can I help you?" "I need to access my safe deposit box," Royal said, his voice steady. He was surprised at how calm he sounded. "Of course. Do you have your key?" He reached into his pocket and placed the heavy bronze key on the desk. The woman's eyebrows rose slightly. It was clearly not one of their modern, standard-issue keys. She picked it up, examining the tag. "Box 4814, she read. She typed the number into her computer. "This is one of our older, oversized boxes. It's registered to an Elijah Collins." "He was my father," Royal said. "He passed away. I'm the designated deputy on the account." He'd found the small card in his father's wallet after he died, the one that named him as having access, and had forgotten about it until now. "I'm very sorry for your loss," the woman said kindly. "I'll just need to see your ID and we'll get you right in." He provided his driver's license. She verified his identity, then stood. "Right this way, Mr. Collins." She led him through a massive circular steel door that looked like something out of a spy movie. The vault was cold and silent. Rows upon rows of gleaming metal boxes lined the walls, from tiny slots to large drawers. She walked to a lower section and stopped in front of a drawer marked 4814. It was one of the largest boxes in the vault. "I'll use our guard key first," she explained, inserting a key from her belt into the top lock and turning it. "Now you can use yours." Royal's hand was steady as he inserted the bronze key into the bottom lock. It slid in with a satisfying precision click. He turned it. The lock disengaged with a solid thunk. The woman pulled the long, heavy metal box from the wall and placed it on a nearby rolling cart. "Would you like a private viewing room?" she asked. "Yes, please." She led him to a small, windowless room with a table and a single chair, then left, closing the door softly behind her. He was alone with the box. It was heavy, much heavier than he expected. He took another deep breath and lifted the lid. The first thing he saw was the money. It was cash, stacks and stacks of it, all $100 bills neatly wrapped in paper bands from a bank. It was old money, the bills worn and soft. It filled more than half of the box. He picked up one of the stacks. The band was marked $10,000. He quickly, roughly counted the stacks. There were at least 100 of them, maybe more. His hands started to tremble slightly. He did the math in his head. 100 stacks of $10,000. That was $1 million. He sat down hard in the chair, his mind reeling. There was more. He counted again, more carefully this time. 120 stacks, $1.2 million, $200,000 in cash, in front of him. Beneath the stacks of cash was a thick, sealed manila envelope. His name, Royal, was written on the front in his father's unmistakable script. This had to be the letter. Below the envelope lay a stiff, legal-sized document held together by a brass fastener. He lifted it out. The top page read, Deed of Trust. He scanned the document. It was the deed to a property. Whispering Pines Lodge, Lot 4, Lake Delton, Wisconsin. The lodge in the Wisconsin Dells, his father's favorite place on earth. They'd gone there every summer when Royal was a boy for a week of fishing and campfires. His father had always talked about buying a place up there one day. Apparently he had. And it was now in a trust, with Royal named as the sole beneficiary. His head was spinning. The money, the lodge. It was too much to process. He set the deed aside and picked up the manila envelope. His hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the sheer, earth-shattering gravity of the moment. He tore open the seal and pulled out a sheaf of papers at least 10 pages long, filled with his father's strong, looped handwriting. He began to read. "My dearest son," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then the day I prayed would never come has arrived. I am sorry for your broken heart. I know it hurts, but I am also proud of you for having the strength to open this box and face what comes next. Now for the questions I know you have. The money. It's not dirty money, son. Back in the late 80s, I did an electrical job for a young fellow starting a software company in his garage. He couldn't pay me the full $5,000 he owed me. Instead, he offered me stock in his little company. Everyone told me I was a fool, but I liked the kid. I saw a spark in him. I took the stock. That company was Microsoft. I sold most of it off in the late 90s before the bubble burst. I was just a simple electrician, so no one ever knew. I paid the taxes, put the money away, and never touched it. It was my secret, my safety net. Now it's yours. I saw the way Amaya looked at you on your wedding day. I saw her looking at your wallet, not at your heart. I saw the ambition in her eyes, and it wasn't for you, it was for what you could provide on her way to something better. I hoped I was wrong. I truly did. But a man who works with his hands learns to see how things are built. And your marriage, son, it was built on a weak foundation. This money is not for revenge. Do not use it that way. Revenge makes a man bitter and small. This money is for your freedom. It's for a new beginning. It is non-marital property, an inheritance from me to you. And no court in the land can give her a penny of it as long as you handle it correctly. That is where Arthur Daniels comes in. He is the best. He helped me set up the trust for the lodge. He will protect you. His number is in here. Call him today. The lodge is yours, free and clear. It's where our family was happiest. It's where I taught you to fish, to be patient, to be quiet, and just listen to the world. Go there, heal, build something real, something with your own two hands, something that can't be taken away from you. A man's worth isn't in his bank account, son. It's in his character. It's in his word. It's in the love he gives freely, without calculation. You are a wealthy man in all the ways that matter. This money, this is just a tool. Use it to build a life where you are valued for who you are, not for what you have. I love you, son. I've always had your back, and I always will. Love, Dad. By the time Royal finished reading, silent tears were streaming down his face. They weren't tears of grief for his lost marriage. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude and love for his father, for the man who saw everything, who protected him even from beyond the grave, and who had given him not just a fortune, but a future. He carefully folded the letter, his hands now perfectly steady. He knew exactly what he had to do. His father had given him a schematic, and he was going to follow it to the letter. At 11:00 a.m., from a quiet corner of the bank lobby, he dialed the number for Daniels and Associates. Arthur Daniels' office? A polite voice answered. Hello? Royal said, his voice imbued with a new, quiet authority. My name is Royal Collins. My father, Elijah Collins, suggested I call. I need to speak with Mr. Daniels. It's urgent. There was a brief pause. One moment, sir. A minute later, a deep, calm voice came on the line. This is Arthur Daniels. Mr. Daniels, Royal said. My father was Elijah Collins. He told me to call you when the time came. There was another pause, this one filled with understanding. I see, Arthur Daniels said softly. I was very sorry to hear of your father's passing, son. He was a fine man, a very wise man. How soon can you be at my office? The offices of Daniels and Associates were on the 40th floor of a different downtown skyscraper, one that projected quiet, old money power rather than flashy, new money gloss. The receptionist led Royal into a large corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Arthur Daniels stood to greet him. He was a tall, impeccably dressed black man in his late 60s, with a fringe of gray at his temples and eyes that were both kind and incredibly sharp. He looked at Royal not as a client, but as the son of an old friend. Royal, he said, shaking his hand firmly, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Your father spoke of you often. Please, sit. The office was filled with law books and African art. It felt solid, grounded. Royal sat in a plush leather chair that probably cost more than his living room set. He felt a sense of calm settle over him. He was in the right place. Your father was one of the smartest men I ever knew, Arthur began, sitting behind his massive mahogany desk. Not just about money, about people. He told me about the arrangement he made for you. He called it his contingency plan. Royal managed a small smile. He called it my fire escape. Arthur chuckled, a deep, warm sound. That sounds like him. So I take it the contingency has been triggered. Royal's smile faded. He recounted the events of the previous night, his voice low and devoid of emotion. He told Arthur about Amaya's confession, her coldness, her plans to divide their assets. He laid out the 6 years of subtle humiliations, the financial pressures, her casual contempt for his work. He spoke with the bronze key composure that was now his shield. He wasn't a victim telling a sad story. He was a man reporting the facts. Arthur listened patiently, his hands steepled, his eyes never leaving Royal's face. He didn't interrupt. He let him tell the whole story. When Royal was finished, the lawyer nodded slowly. Her cruelty is breathtaking in its simplicity, Arthur said, his voice laced with a cold anger on Royal's behalf. And her legal assumptions are, thankfully, as flawed as her character. He leaned forward. First things first, the contents of that box. Your father and I structured this very, very carefully. The cash is from the sale of a premarital gifted asset, the stock. The lodge was purchased with those funds and placed into a revocable trust with you as the sole beneficiary, long before you were married. Legally, it is an inheritance. It is entirely your non-marital property. She has no claim to it. not a single dime. The relief was so immense it was like a physical weight being lifted from Royal's shoulders. However, Arthur continued, his tone becoming sharp and strategic, we must move with absolute precision. The moment she finds out about this money, she will become a different kind of animal. Her lawyers will try to argue that the funds were commingled, that you intended to share them, any argument they can invent to get their hands on it. We must not give them that opening. What do we do? Royal asked. First, we secure the assets. I want you to go back to that bank. You will withdraw the entire cash amount. My paralegal will meet you there with the necessary paperwork to have it deposited directly into my firm's client trust account. Once it is in the IOLTA account, it is shielded. It cannot be frozen or touched in the divorce proceedings without a direct court order, which they will not get. He paused, looking at Royal intently. This is critical. You must do this today, before she or her paralegal friend get any smart ideas. Okay, Royal said, nodding. Second, we file. We don't wait for her to make the first move. We file for divorce tomorrow morning. We will petition for an immediate we won't for temporary freeze on all joint marital assets, including bank accounts and credit cards, pending a full financial discovery. This will prevent her from draining the accounts or running up debt that you would be partially liable for. We will be citing irreconcilable differences based on her admission of infidelity. She'll be furious, Royal said, thinking of Amaya's reliance on their joint credit card for her daily expenses. Let her be furious, Arthur said coldly. This is not a game of feelings. This is a legal dissolution of a partnership she has already voided. She is the one who chose to end it. We are simply formalizing her decision in a way that protects you. We will be aggressive, we will be thorough, and we will be relentless. He named his fee, a $25,000 retainer to be paid from the cash Royal was about to deposit. That will cover the initial filing and discovery. Her legal fees will likely be paid for by her new partner, until he realizes the scope of what he's gotten himself into. Royal didn't even flinch at the amount. It was a fraction of the freedom his father had given him. It was the best money he would ever spend. Okay, Royal said again. He felt a surge of power, the feeling of a man taking control of his own destiny. He was no longer a victim of Amaya's whims. He was a client of Arthur Daniels. He was the son of Elijah Collins. One more thing, Arthur said, his expression softening slightly. Your father wanted me to tell you something if this day ever came. He said, tell my boy that building a new life is a lot like wiring a new house. You have to rip out the old faulty wiring first. It's messy, but it's the only way to make sure the new structure is safe and the lights stay on. We're about to start ripping out the old wiring, son. It might get messy, but I promise you, we will make sure your lights stay on. Royal stood up and shook Arthur's hand again. Thank you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you for everything. Don't thank me, Arthur said with a grim smile. Thank your father. Now go to the bank. Let's get to work. Thursday at 1:30 in the afternoon was, for Amaya, a moment of triumph. She was seated at a prime outdoor table at Spoon and Stable, one of the most acclaimed and expensive restaurants in Minneapolis's trendy North Loop neighborhood. The sun was warm on her face. Across the table, Marcus Thorne, her new life personified, was telling an amusing story about closing a multi-million-dollar deal. He was handsome, powerful, and wore a $3,000 Italian suit as casually as Royal wore his work shirts. The lunch, with its craft cocktails and exquisitely plated food, would easily cost over $200, a sum Marcus wouldn't even notice on his corporate card. Amaya felt a sense of delicious, liberating freedom. She had done it. She had shed her old, drab life. The conversation with Royal had been easier than she'd expected. He was sad, of course, but passive, defeated. The divorce would be a simple matter of paperwork, and then her real life, the one she deserved, would begin. She took a sip of her $22 glass of Sancerre and laughed at Marcus's punchline. It was in that moment of peak contentment that a man in a plain, inexpensive suit approached their table. He was unremarkable in every way, which made his presence all the more jarring in this curated environment of wealth and style. "Amaya Collins?" he asked, his voice polite but firm. Amaya's smile faltered. She looked at him, annoyed by the interruption. "Yes?" The man didn't say another word. He simply slid a thick 9 by 12-inch envelope onto the table, placing it directly beside her plate of seared scallops. The envelope landed with a soft but definitive thud. "You've been served," he said, then turned and walked away, melting back into the lunchtime crowd. The words hung in the air. "You've been served." It was a phrase from television, not from her life. Marcus stopped talking, his expression shifting from amusement to confusion. The chatter from the surrounding tables seemed to fade away. All Amaya could hear was the frantic pounding of her own heart. Her hands trembled as she reached for the envelope. It felt heavy, official. She tore it open, her movements clumsy. The document inside was thick. At the top of the first page, in bold, stark letters, were the words, "In District Court, 4th Judicial District, State of Minnesota." Below that, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Her breath caught in her throat. She scanned the page. Petitioner, Royal Elijah Collins. Respondent, Amaya Marie Collins. This wasn't right. He couldn't have. He didn't know how. Then her eyes fell on the name at the bottom of the page, under the signature line for the petitioner's attorney. Arthur Daniels, Daniels and Associates. The name hit her like a physical blow. Arthur Daniels. She knew that name. Everyone in her world knew that name. He was a legend, a shark, the most feared and most expensive family law attorney in the Twin Cities. He didn't handle simple, amicable divorces. He handled wars. Her face went bone white. The blood drained from it, leaving her skin pale and clammy under her expensive foundation. How? How could Royal, her simple $60,000 a year husband, afford Arthur Daniels? It was impossible. It made no sense. "What is it?" Marcus asked, his voice edged with irritation. She couldn't speak. She frantically flipped through the pages. She saw the motion for an ex parte temporary restraining order, freezing all marital assets, the joint checking account, the joint savings, the credit cards issued on their shared accounts, all of it frozen, effective immediately. She saw the list of discovery demands, asking for a full accounting of her personal spending for the last 24 months, her work bonuses, her expense reports. It was an invasion. It was an attack. The public nature of it was the most galling part, served like a common criminal in front of Marcus, in front of this whole restaurant full of people. The carefully constructed image of her seamless, upwardly mobile life had just been shattered by a man in a cheap suit and a thick white envelope. The humiliation was a hot, burning fire in her cheeks. "Amaya, what is going on?" Marcus demanded, his voice low and angry now. People at the next table were starting to stare. It's my husband," she stammered, the words tasting like ash. "He's filed for divorce." Marcus's face hardened. "You told me he was agreeable. You told me this was going to be simple." "I thought it was," she whispered, her mind racing, trying to piece together how this could have happened. The calm Royal from yesterday morning, the errand to the bank, the pension paperwork. It was all a lie. He had been planning this. He had been playing her. The thought was so outrageous, so contrary to everything she believed about him, that it barely registered. The waiter arrived with their main courses, oblivious. He placed a plate of perfectly roasted duck in front of her. The smell, which moments ago would have been divine, was now nauseating. Her triumphant lunch had turned into a public execution. Her new life was already cracking before it had even begun. She looked at the legal document in her hands, then at Marcus's furious face, and a cold, terrifying dread began to seep into her bones. She had made a critical, catastrophic mistake. She had underestimated Royal, and she had no idea the full price of that mistake was yet to be calculated. The first frantic voicemail came at 1:45 p.m., just moments after the process server had left. Royal was at the hospital, standing in the loud, hot boiler room, the place Amaya despised. He let the call go to voicemail, watching her name flash on the screen of his cheap smartphone. A minute later, the notification popped up. He listened to it, a small, grim smile touching his lips. "Royal, what is this? What the hell did you do?" Her voice was shrill, panicked. "You hired Arthur Daniels? Are you insane? Call me back right now." He deleted the message. The second came at 2:15 p.m. As he was checking the pressure on boiler there 3. He was calm, focused on his work. The familiar hum of the machinery was a soothing counterpoint to the chaos he had unleashed. "Okay, look," her voice was different now, trying to sound reasonable, trying to regain control. "I was going to tell you about Marcus. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. This is so aggressive, Royal. You can't just file with some shark lawyer. We were going to do this amicably. We can still do this amicably. Just call off your lawyer and talk to me." He deleted the message. The third message, the one he had been waiting for, arrived at 3 p.m. He imagined her, having left the disastrous lunch, trying to pay for something. Her credit card. "They've frozen our joint accounts pending discovery?" she shrieked, the raw panic unmistakable. "Royal, my Amex is tied to that account. My gas tank is on empty. I can't buy groceries. What am I supposed to do?" He let the silence of the boiler room answer her question. He deleted the message. The consequences were beginning to cascade, each one a direct result of her own actions, now reflected back at her through the cold, clear lens of the law. He felt no pleasure in her panic, only a quiet, grim satisfaction. This was not revenge. This was accountability. This was the old, faulty wiring being ripped out. The downfall of Amaya Collins was not a single, dramatic event, but a slow, methodical dismantling of the life she had so carefully curated. It was a death by 1,000 cuts, each one administered with the devastating precision of Arthur Daniels' legal strategy. First came the financial reckoning. The centerpiece of the battle was, of course, the $1.2 million. Amaya's lawyer, a competent but hopelessly outmatched attorney from a mid-sized firm, filed motion after motion trying to get it classified as a marital asset. They argued that Royal's father had intended it for the couple. They argued that by waiting to reveal it, Royal had committed fraud. Arthur Daniels dismantled their arguments with contemptuous ease. In a deposition, he had the contents of Elijah's letter read into the record. The words, "I saw the way she looked at your wallet, not at your heart." Echoed in the sterile conference room, he produced the stock sale records from the 1990s and the trust documents for the lodge, all dated years before the marriage. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, took less than an hour to rule. The cash and the lodge were Royal's sole and separate property, an inheritance entirely non-marital and untouchable. It was a fatal blow to Amaya's case. The grand prize she never even knew she was playing for had vanished before her eyes. Next was the house, the modest northeast bungalow she had once despised, but now desperately clung to as her only significant asset. The court ordered its sale. It sold quickly in the hot Minneapolis market for $350,000, After paying off the remaining $210,000 on the mortgage, there was $140,000 in equity. Amaya's lawyer argued for a simple 50-50 split of $70,000 each, but Arthur Daniels had another card to play. He produced the bank records showing that the original $40,000 down payment had come directly from an account that held only the funds from Royal's mother's premarital inheritance. He argued successfully that this amount should be returned to Royal first, off the top, before the marital equity was divided. The judge agreed. So Royal received his $40,000 back, and the remaining $100,000 was split. He walked away with $90,000. Amaya walked away with $50,000. After paying her mounting legal bills, which had ballooned to over $20,000, she was left with less than $30,000. It wasn't enough for a down payment on a new condo. Not in the city she refused to leave. Her career, the very engine of her ambition, was the next casualty. The divorce was messy, and thanks to Marcus Thorne's high profile, it became whispered gossip in the tight-knit Minneapolis corporate world. It turned out Marcus's wife was not as clueless as he had believed. She hired her own shark, and their divorce became a public spectacle. The details of his affair with Amaya were leaked to a local business journal. Marcus was forced to resign in disgrace from his $750,000 a year partnership to avoid being fired. With her powerful protector gone and her name now associated with a toxic scandal, Amaya's position at her own firm became untenable. She was quietly let go 3 months after the divorce was finalized, given a paltry severance package, and a non-disclosure agreement. The lifestyle she had prized above all else evaporated. The $650 a month lease on the Lexus SUV was a luxury she could no longer afford. Without her job or Royal's income, she defaulted on the payments. The car was repossessed from the parking lot of her new, much smaller apartment. The shame of it was acute. The $4,200 Chanel bag, the $800 Tumi luggage, the designer dresses, they were sold one by one on the RealReal and Poshmark for pennies on the dollar, the money going to pay her rent and her ever-growing credit card debt, now solely in her name. She moved from her sister's place into a $1,200 a month one-bedroom apartment in Richfield, a first-ring suburb she had once openly sneered at. Her social circle, the friends who had admired her success and her style, vanished. They stopped returning her calls. Lunches at Spoon and Stable were replaced by solitary meals of takeout in her sparsely furnished apartment. She was no longer a player. She was a cautionary tale. The final, quietest consequence came 6 months after the divorce was final. Royal received a formal letter from her attorney. It was a request for a final meeting, framed as a plea for closure. Arthur advised against it, but Royal agreed. They met at a neutral, anonymous Starbucks on Lexington Parkway. She looked smaller, diminished. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a simple sweater and jeans. The fire in her eyes was gone, replaced by a weary exhaustion. She apologized. She said she was sorry for the pain she caused, for the things she said. She cried. But even in her apology, Royal could hear the echo of her true nature. "I just don't understand," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Why didn't you just tell me about the money? We could have had everything." And in that one sentence, he saw that she still didn't get it. She never would. She wasn't sorry for betraying him. She was sorry she had bet on the wrong horse. He looked at her, the woman he had once loved so desperately, and he felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a vast, empty distance. "Because it was never about the money, Amaya," he said, his voice quiet. He stood up, leaving his own coffee untouched. "It was about the love, and you said it yourself. You never loved me." "Not really." He walked out of the Starbucks and didn't look back, leaving her alone with her coffee and the ruins of a life she had built on a foundation of sand. The wiring was finally ripped out. The house was clean. 2 years later, the sun was setting over Lake Delton, painting the calm water in strokes of orange, pink, and deep purple. Royal Collins sat on the edge of a newly built wooden dock, a simple fishing rod in his hand. The air was cool and smelled of pine needles and damp earth. This was his home now. The Whispering Pines Lodge was no longer just a deed in a box. It was a living, breathing place. He hadn't quit his job. He still worked at the Hennepin County Medical Center, finding a deep and abiding satisfaction in the honest, tangible work. He'd reduced his hours, working 3 days a week, and spent the other 4 up here at the lodge. He'd used a portion of the money to respectfully renovate the old cabin, expanding it, adding a modern kitchen and a wide screened-in porch. It wasn't a palace, it was a comfortable, sturdy home, built with good materials and his own 2 hands. The bulk of the money, nearly $1 million, remained invested, managed by a quiet firm Arthur Daniels had recommended. It grew steadily, a silent testament to his father's foresight. But its real value was not in its growth, but in what it allowed him to build. With $200,000, he had established the Elijah Collins Memorial Scholarship. It wasn't for aspiring doctors or lawyers. It was a fund dedicated to helping young men and women in Minneapolis enter the skilled trades: electricians, plumbers, welders, and yes, boiler operators. Every year, he received a packet of letters from the recipients, kids from neighborhoods like his, telling him about their apprenticeships, their hopes, the pride they felt in learning a craft. Those letters were worth more to him than any stock dividend. He had started dating again, slowly and cautiously. Her name was Sarah, a local first-grade teacher with a kind smile and eyes that saw him, the real him. Their dates weren't at fancy restaurants. They were hikes in the state park, evenings spent cooking together in the lodge's new kitchen, or quiet hours, fishing off this very dock. It was a love built not on image or ambition, but on shared values and quiet companionship. It was real. On the mantelpiece inside the lodge, next to a framed photo of his smiling father holding up a large walleye, sat the old bronze key. It was a reminder, not of a broken heart, but of a profound and enduring love. He now understands the true nature of his father's gift. Elijah hadn't left him $1.2 million. He had left him a choice. He had left him the power to define his own worth, independent of anyone else's validation or approval. The money was just a tool. The key, just a trigger. The real inheritance was the lesson that true wealth is not what you have in your bank account, but what you have in your character. It's the integrity of your work, the strength of your word, and the love you build with your own 2 hands. It's a fortune no one can ever take away from you. As the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear in the vast dark sky, Royal reeled in his line. He hadn't caught anything. It didn't matter. He was content. He was free. He had found a love that went far beyond pride, a quiet, sturdy peace that was as solid and real as the old dock beneath his feet. True wealth isn't about what you can buy. It's about what you can build. It's about having a foundation so strong that when the storms come, you're the one left standing. What's the most valuable thing someone has ever taught you? Share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories about finding strength in the hardest moments.